Hello, welcome back to the pod book. I want to start this chapter with a story. My office that I'm in right now is at the end of my garden. And some years ago, when I was walking to and fro from my house, I would stop and talk to my elderly neighbour over the fence, a man called Brian. He's dead now. And Brian was a real Somerset yokel, is what we would call them. He's a man from Somerset, like me, and he had a very strong accent. You might hear it a bit in my accent. And we would chat about this and that, and he'd smoke his roll-ups and cough a lot. He worked all his life on building motorways. A very practical, down-to-earth man. And one day, he surprised me by saying, "All right, Tim, hey, I'm wondering, I see you in your office doing that meditation. Is that any good?" So I said, "Well, yeah, I really like it, Brian." And then he said, "Oh, I can't do that meditation." And I, in all honesty, was surprised that he tried. And then he explained why. He said, "Because when I get very still, I become a bird. And I can fly out across the countryside, seeing everything." He said, "Yeah, the first time it happened was when I was with my wife when she was dying, and I became very, very still. And suddenly I was a bird." So it turns out my neighbour Brian, who'd spent his life making motorways, was also a shape-shifting shaman who could fly out as a bird and see the countryside. So what's going on with that? He certainly wasn't making it up. What was he experiencing? Some sort of dream? Some sort of fantasy? Or something more? I'm aware of a lot of research into what gets called out-of-body experiences. Now, I'm going to suggest, before we reach the end of this chapter, that that's not a good name for them, in a way. But that's what they get called. And this is about people who can experience, like Brian, but not necessarily becoming a bird, but they can see themselves out of their bodies, seeing and listening in the world as if they were their bodies, but their bodies are lying on their bed, for instance, or in meditation. And I studied this when I studied Western esoteric magic when I was very young. And it was fascinating. I haven't gone down that path of really going into it, but I know many people who have, and their experiences are quite extraordinary. What is that? I also know from my studies of near-death experiences that this is common then. So Dr. Jeffrey Long, one of the near-death researchers, says that 45% of people who experience a near-death experience also report an out-of-body experience, which means that, for instance, they're having a cardiac arrest and they can describe how they're being resuscitated, even though their body is dead, their brain dead. But they can later say exactly what was happening, who said what, who did what, as if they are also in the room. Sometimes from above, a bit like Brian. Dr. Janice Holden, another researcher, said that when the reports that people gave were checked out, 92% were completely accurate, with no inaccuracy at all. including, and this is puzzling, events that had taken place in a different room to the room that they were being resuscitated in. How's that possible? But it's reported a lot. There are many, many, many reports of this. Seeing without biological eyes. Listening without biological ears. Very curious. Now, the reason I'm addressing this right now is that I'm fascinated by the curious, and these are the sort of questions I get asked all the time, especially by folks in the spiritual world. It's like, well, what about this? This is a strange experience. What do you think that is? And the reason I bring it up is because I want to claim that the idea I've developed of psi sensing has the ability to answer this and many, many other questions. It shows that potential. Someone I really admire is George Lemaitre, because he came up with the whole idea of the evolving universe, or gets called the Big Bang. He didn't use that term at all. And he said that what we're looking for in science, but it's in everything, is what he called comprehensive simplicity, which I love that, is that really powerful explanatory ideas are simple, but can explain complex things. They're comprehensive. And I think psi sensing, and indeed psychocausality as well, that the psyche is a way of sensing and it's a way of acting on the other levels, has that comprehensive simplicity. So it would be like me saying, you know that you are aware of the stars at night. You know that you're aware of reading a book. You know you're aware of me. I think all that can be explained by one thing, which is seeing, which is your eyes picking up light and interpreting it. Now, of course, no one's going to find that astonishing. But that's kind of what I'm claiming with psi sensing. There is all sorts of imaginal experience. No, I want to go stronger. All imaginal experience is psi sensing. Now, let me remind you what I mean by psi sensing. What I'm saying here is that the system you have developed, not just you, but previously in the animal world, biological systems have developed the ability to read light as looking, to read vibrations in the air as listening, pressure as touch, and so on. And that then the most emergent, the latest of these ways of reading oneself and the universe is the psyche. So I've called it psi sensing. And that this latest way of reading is the way we read ourselves, our own processing. We can read our past, which is memory. We can project that into the future, which is imagining, but that we can also read the whole imaginal domain, which is what we experience after death. It's how we experience the supersoul. It's how we experience the oneness. All these things that we can't sense with our biological senses, we can psi sense. And we're reading information, but in this more emergent way. And I want to suggest that this can help us understand all sorts of otherwise incomprehensible, strange phenomena, of which these out-of-body experiences are an example. So that what I'm suggesting here is that the system, now what do I mean by the system? Let's get that absolutely clear too. Look, you are your body. Of course, you are your psyche. But on a deeper level, what I'm saying about identity is that you are temporal. You are a process. You are an emerging, evolving, complex passivity system, which roots you back into the evolution of all the passivity systems that have created the universe. You're a branch on the one tree of becoming. That's what you are. You exist more like a program in the infoverse, which is operating the body, which is pulling together all the elements that allow it to function, to see and to hear. And the elements pass through, the cells come and go, the atoms come and go, but you're the operating system, which is evolving all the passivity algorithms to keep it functioning. And then on the more emergent level of the psyche, all of those ideational categories, all of that past of the psyche, which is the same, operating you as a psyche. And that what's happening is that system can, through as the body, it can see and hear, and then as the evolving psyche, it can read the universe, and itself, of course, but it can read anything potentially. And this is an emergent sense. It's not very developed compared to the others. Some people have it better than others, and the esoteric traditions have been about training that. But that when it's trained, or when there's a natural, perhaps, faculty for some people, you can read the oneness, God, the dead, and the world as if you're looking at it. And as with all psi-sensing experiences, what you experience is imaginal. So that you're experiencing images as if you are looking at the world. So you're psi-sensing it and then creating images as if you are seeing it. And these can be vague, or for some people they can be very, very clear and accurate indeed. And in that way, it's no difference to say farseeing, where there are people, not me, I can't do this, but there are people you can give coordinates on a map and they use that as a focus, and then they can focus their psi-sensing, as I would say, and they can see what's there. Sometimes clearly, sometimes it's vague, but enough that you can see, oh, this is happening. So that for Brian, he projected himself out into that as a bird. For many of the people I know who have out-of-body experiences, they project themselves as their own self, like a version of themselves. But it is imaginary, or it's imaginal. When I say it's imaginary, it sounds like it's just made up. I'm not saying that. It's a way of psi-sensing the world. But it's an imaginal experience. You know, that most of the people I know who report to me their out-of-body experiences is, they're not walking around as naked, for instance. They could be anything, but mostly they're dressed because it's an image of themselves. So not really out of body, more like being able to perceive beyond the body. So there's what I can see, but I can project my psi-sensing and I can as if see. And the evidence for this is pretty damn strong. I just, little thing, and doing research for this chapter, I was watching numbers of videos on YouTube where people, a lot of children, have trained themselves to be able to see without eyes. Incredibly well. So that there are people who are actually blind, and then there are people wearing really heavy masks, so they can't see anything. And they are able to sort shapes and colours, to put playing cards into their suits, and to be able to do all of it astonishingly quickly, just as quickly as you or I would with eyes open. Bang, 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 that goes there, and yet they can't see. But they can. They can. Now, so what I'm suggesting is the system, the evolving passivity system, which is running the body so it can see, is running the psyche so it can psi-sense information. The reason that the out-of-body description, it's fine because you're experiencing things which are beyond your body. There's nothing wrong with using that term, but it kind of gets associated with the old way of looking at spirituality that I want us to move on from. So one of the traditional ways of understanding these experiences is that we have a subtle body or a soul. In spirituality, there's often many levels to this, but the overall idea is you've fallen into a body, which is like you've come from the above and you've gone, and then you're in this density. But this thing which you are on another level can pop out and wander around, because that's what you really are. I'm not convinced by that. I'm not convinced by it because the psyche, it seems to me, the soul, is clearly emergent. And the reason I say that is because all the experiences we have on that level are of images of the sensory world. So that seems strange, that we're having images of shapes and colours and flowers and people and vistas and mountains and whatever it is that we experience in our dreams, in our visions, in our shamanic states, even with just shapes and psychedelics. All of that are reworked versions of things we could see or hear, for instance. So it seems much more likely to me that the evolving biological systems have developed the ability to experience seeing consciously in high definition, listening consciously in high definition, giving rise to these experiences we're having in the sensory world. And then when we've come on to psi sensing, we've been psi sensing, for example, the past, where we experienced those sensory experiences, and now we're experiencing an image of those sensory experiences. And that beginnings of the imaginal has just gone, and so we've got all of the imaginos, all of those potential imaginal experiences, but they've come after the sensory world. Seems much more plausible to me than the other way around. And also, it's like if the soul or the subtle body, or whatever name you want to give it, if it already has the ability to see without eyes, why have we got eyes? If it can already hear without ears, why have we got ears? Surely it's more likely that we've developed the ability to read the material world, and then we've developed the ability to psi sense it as if we are sensing the material world, even though we're on a more emergent level of sensing now, and we haven't got the eyes. But the eyes came first. The seeing came first, and then the as if seeing, which is it's the latest, most emergent sense. Okay, so what am I saying in this chapter? I'm saying psi sensing has that quality of comprehensive simplicity, where it can explain memory, it can explain imagination, it can explain spiritual experiences, and I think it can explain these unusual but fascinating experiences, like being able to perceive beyond your body, to move your attention as if you are walking around in the world, even though your body isn't, of seeing without eyes, of farseeing, of shamanic shape-shifting, where it's as if you'll become a bird and you can see the vista, and all of that. Near-death experiences where someone can be out, no longer able to see, no longer got a brain that's working, but able to report exactly what happens in the room, or even what happens in the room next door. Because the system, which is not the body, it's what's operating the body, the psychobiological system which is operating the body and the psyche, is able to still do that. It's able to psi sense. It's able to move itself around with its intention, as if it's sensing. So, let me end with this thought. As I've said before, spirituality, in terms of its practices, is largely about learning how to psi sense better, because it's the latest sense. How we can focus, that's what meditation does. How we can focus to make it something we process in high definition, makes it vivid. Hold that long enough that it becomes vivid, we don't get distracted somewhere else. And that these esoteric practices enable us to really start to explore the next level that's coming for human beings, so that we can, if we wish, learn to move our attention around the world as if we're seeing, even though our eyes are closed. How we can psi sense the fundamental oneness of being, even though we can't sense it biologically. How we can psi sense that supersoul, that vast loving intelligence. And part of what I want to encourage as we go forward into our unividuality, into the new human, individuals, is for us to, I think, embrace the simplicity of this vision and the practicality of this vision. Because my intuition and hope is that the individual is somebody who is sensing on a whole new level, and that will lead to us creating a whole new world together, in which these more emergent faculties are no longer strange, but increasingly commonplace. Things that we explore together, things we introduce our children to. A valuable addition to how we read the universe and how we interact with it. So where are we going to go in the next chapter? Well, one of the great things about sharing this information in the form of a pod book rather than a traditional book is that I get to see people's responses week by week as we publish each chapter. And one of the areas that I'm aware people struggle with is the idea that there is no God at the beginning, no big mind that's the source of everything. And I think people struggle because they find it a bit cold, that they feel they're losing something, which is really important to them. Now, I don't think that is true, so I want to return to the fundamental ontology that I'm exploring and present it in a slightly different way that I hope will enable people to see more clearly why I don't think we're losing anything, but rather we're gaining greater clarity, and that this new worldview is actually more inspiring and more intellectually satisfying than our previous worldviews, the religious worldviews of the past. So I think that's where we'll go next. Back to the beginning.